When you're new to hiking, your usual source of clothing is whatever you can find in your closet, and maybe a few cheap additions such as a plastic poncho. Once you decide you're in the game for keeps, it's time to start upgrading. This video may give you some ideas on how to do that. Your first serious clothing upgrade should be your shoes and socks. Hiking means spending the day pounding your feet on trails that can be hard and rocky. Cheap boots and socks will give you sore feet and blisters. Well-made, well-fitting boots and socks will let you remember why hiking is fun. So, if this is your idea of how to buy hiking boots, think again. Don't buy the cheapest boots you can find. Buy the best boots you can afford. Here's my footwear. For winter hiking or difficult terrain, I have ankle-length boots. For milder weather and terrain, I have low-cut hiking shoes. Both pairs are Echos, which cost more than I like to think about, but the toe boxes on most boots are too small for me, and my toes rub against the boot all day. With the Echos, my toes have enough room, and not getting blisters makes the extra money worth it. As you buy your own boots, you need to think about the fit just as much as I did. Before you pull out your plastic, walk back and forth in the boots for several minutes. Be sure to do that on a hard surface, not on carpet. And while you're at it, press the front and back of the boot against a hard surface to feel how your toes and heels fit. If your toes jam against the front of the boot, or if your heel slides around in the back, you're asking for trouble. Don't assume that thicker socks will make up for a bad fit. When you splurge on good boots, you should also spend more for good socks. Your feet aren't shaped like cylinders, so ditch those tubular socks with blister-causing seams at the toes. The socks you see here are not just carefully tailored, they come in left and right, just like your feet. With socks this good, you don't need liner socks to help prevent blisters. And these socks aren't cotton, which means that they still provide some warmth when they're wet. Let's talk some more about cotton. This is me in 1971. My basic outfit for that hike was cotton skivvies, cotton jeans, and a cotton t-shirt. In my defense, that was before today's hiking clothes. But today, most of the time, cotton is a bad idea for a hike. If cotton gets wet, it's cold and clammy and stays that way for a long time, which can lead to great misery or even hypothermia. The only time to go with cotton is when it's hot, hot, hot outside, day and night, like in the desert in the summer. There's another thing wrong with this picture, all that skin exposed to the sun. This was a multi-day hike, and by the end of it, I had a bad case of sunburn. I didn't worry about that much back then, but I do now. After a lot of time in the sun, both on hikes and as part of my job, I've had a doctor snip biopsy samples off my face, and the backs of my hands are like tissue paper. If I'd been more careful about sunlight when I was young, I wouldn't have so much skin damage today. This is me on a hike 4.5 decades later. I'm wearing synthetic fibers instead of cotton, and I'm mostly covered up. I use sunscreen on the exposed parts of my skin and use sunglasses to protect my eyes from that harsh southwestern sun. The key to dressing for the outdoors is layering. The basic idea is that as conditions change, you add or subtract layers without having to strip down to your skin. The standard system involves 3 layers, base, middle, and shell. I use a 4-part system with a base layer, 2 middle layers, and a shell because it gives me more flexibility in the changing conditions I often encounter. So how much can conditions change in the Southwest? Back when I was a grad student in Tucson, one morning it was 72 and sunny, and I went to school in Levi's and a t-shirt and sandals. 2 hours later it was 32 and snowing heavily. Imagine if I was dressed that way and 5 miles from my car when the weather changed. I probably wouldn't be alive today. So when I plan a hike, I know from experience that extreme weather changes can happen. Let's look at my base layer. When it's warm, it's just synthetic fiber boxer shorts. As it gets cooler, I add a synthetic fiber t-shirt with short sleeves. If that's not enough, I use a synthetic fiber t-shirt with long sleeves. And if it's seriously cold, I can go to merino wool long underwear. The lesson here is that there is no universal solution to hiking clothing. You need to tailor your approach to the conditions you may face. On pleasant days, my second layer is my outer layer. I always hike in long pants for several reasons. I want to protect my skin from the sun and the rest of me from ticks. Also, if I'm stuck in the wilds overnight, I don't want to be there in bare legs. I prefer these Prana brand hiking pants because they're so well made, but also because the fabric is a little heavier and more wind resistant than the fabric in cheap pants. I hold the pants up using a nylon web belt. On top, my second layer is a synthetic fiber shirt with long sleeves to keep the sun off my arms and a collar to keep the sun off the base of my neck, this one for example. When it's hot, I prefer this Ex Officio Sol-Cool shirt. It's supposed to feel slightly cooler than other fabrics, and in my experience, it does. It lets breezes right through and wicks and evaporates moisture a lot like a cotton t-shirt. It also has a collar to help protect my neck from the sun. I especially like the long sleeves with thumb holes so I can shade the backs of my hands as well as my arms. When it's cold, I can go the other way and wear a wool shirt. Wool is famous for retaining its insulating properties even when it's wet. If you're hiking in wet, cold country, wearing wool could save your life. The standard middle layer, which is my third layer, is the insulating layer, or as I think of it, the puffy layer. It's your key to retaining body heat on a cold day. Even on hikes where I don't use my puffy jacket, I have it in my pack. Partly in case the weather changes, partly in case I get stuck out there overnight. In the Southwest, the temperature can drop 30 degrees or more each night, so your daytime clothes won't get you through till the morning. By the way, no need for a stuff sack for a puffy layer like this. Just stuff it into one of its own sleeves. Last, there's the outer layer, which is my fourth layer. This is the wind and rain shell. Like any good shell, this one includes a hood. Like the puffy layer, I may not use this layer during a hike, but I have it with me anyway. I cringe when I see people hiking in baseball caps. After years of exposure to the outdoors, the tops of my ears got so crispy that if I brushed my hand against them, they started bleeding. After more years of wearing wide-brimmed hats and slopping on sunscreen, my ears are more or less back to normal. You can skip the part where your ears turn into fried pork rinds by wearing a wide-brimmed hat from the beginning. I wear this REI canvas hat on most of my hikes. My one complaint about the canvas hat is that in a steady rain the hat soaks through and then it's soggy and cold. In rain like that, I like to wear a poncho but using a hat instead of the hood. This hat from Marmot doesn't soak through, so it's what I wear when rain is likely. For some reason, it's not quite as comfortable as the canvas hat, or I might wear it all the time. Both hats have chin strings, which is handy in a high wind. We've now gone from my toes to my head, but you're not a well-dressed hiker until you accessorize. I just mentioned my poncho, for example. It covers my pack as well as myself. Also, if it isn't windy, a poncho keeps the rain off while providing maximum ventilation and minimum condensation. And if you have a poncho, you can use it as a ground cloth or small emergency shelter. On cold weather hikes, I carry insulated gloves. For really cold weather, I carry a nice thick watch cap. I always carry a tube scarf. The gauzy one on the left is for summers. The one on the right is a winter buff, and it's great at keeping my neck and ears warm. My final item is this 2-foot square safety orange bandana, which I like to wear during hunting season. Let's go back to this picture and analyze it. It's from a day hike that followed a forest road, so my low-cut shoes were fine. The socks were fitted socks. My base layer was boxer shorts and a short-sleeved t-shirt. I wore long pants and a long-sleeved shirt. I topped those off with my wide-brimmed canvas hat. When the picture was taken, it was a lovely fall afternoon, about 60. At the trailhead that morning it was 25 degrees, so I pulled my puffy jacket and winter buff and gloves from my pack as we set out. Once it warmed up a bit, I took off the gloves and unzipped the jacket. A little later the buff went back into the pack, and a little after that I removed the puffy jacket. In other words, I had the clothing to be comfortable, despite a temperature swing of 35 degrees. And with that, we are finally done. I hope you learned something useful for your own hikes, and I thank you for watching.